Aren't the essential functions the same as the job description? That is a very common question hiring managers and employees ask. They are not the same. A job description is a broad overview of all employees within a job classification. An example would be an administrative assistant 2 in police has the same job description as administrative assistant 2 in tax. Another example would be an equipment operator 2 has the same job description in highway maintenance as it does for water distribution. Essential functions are specific to each division. For example, the administrative assistant 2 has different essential functions for each division in the city that has an administrative assistant 2. The administrative assistant 2 in tax takes checks to deposit, whereas the administrative assistant 2 in police does not. So why do we need to identify essential functions? Essential functions are used for testing, employment, ADA, FMLA, workers' comp, and more. The areas identified in the essential functions are key to civil service examinations. Questions are prepared to reflect the essential functions of the position.
When an employee is hired for a position, one of the conditions of employment is the ability to be recommended for employment by a physician. The physical is specific to the essential functions that must be performed by the employee. In order for the doctor to be able to accurately make this determination, a copy of the essential functions are provided to the physician. Therefore, identifying essential functions is crucial as it may affect a candidate's ability to gain employment. Essential functions are used to determine which job duties an employer may need to reasonably accommodate for an employee with a disability. Marginal functions do not require an accommodation as these tasks are easily reassigned.
When an employee seeks FMLA for his or her own serious medical condition, a doctor must certify that the employee is unable to perform his or her essential functions. Additionally, before this individual may return to work, the doctor needs to clear the employee as being able to perform the essential functions of the job. A treating healthcare provider must certify that the employee is unable or able to perform his or her essential functions with or without restrictions.
Determining whether a function is essential or marginal can often be confusing. To help reduce this confusion, let's look at the definitions along with some examples. When we talk about essential functions, we are talking about the basic job duties of a position that the employee must be able to perform with or without reasonable accommodation, whereas a marginal function are those duties that are performed either very infrequently or could be performed by others without altering the underlying reason that the job exists. Keep in mind, when there is no accommodation that will allow a person to perform marginal functions, the employer must give these duties to other employees or arrange for a trade of duties. An individual with a disability must not be excluded due to an inability to perform a marginal function. Now let's look at some examples. A police officer's ability to discharge a firearm. What are the factors? Well, this function may be performed very infrequently. In fact, there may be an officer who would only ever discharge a weapon for training purposes for his or her entire career. So is this task then marginal? No. A police officer must be able to effectively protect the citizens, other officers, and his or herself from harm. Therefore, taking this function away would then alter the underlying reason the job exists.
Let's examine the following situation involving a receptionist. A receptionist is able to answer the telephone, keep schedules on the computer, and do filing. But his disability prevents him from driving. Thus, he cannot make the twice-a-month delivery to the branch office on the other side of town that previous incumbents have been able to do. Would the delivery be an essential job function? Answer, it depends. The factors. Are there other individuals that could perform this job duty? When reflecting upon this question, keep this in mind. This question is not saying that someone is available to take over the duty temporarily, for example, when an employee is sick or on vacation. This means another individual or group of individuals would need to always be able to perform this job duty. Again, remember that a marginal task is easily reassigned. Looking back to the receptionist, the office is staffed so that there are other individuals available to complete this task. Therefore, the task is marginal.
A job requires the operation of a machine. In the job description, painting the machine twice a month is listed. However, this is not critical to the execution of the job. Operating the machine is the critical role. Therefore, operating the machine is listed on the essential functions, and painting the machine is considered a marginal task. Reassigning the painting of the machine does not alter the machine operator's job.
The essential functions are reviewed and updated if needed every time Human Resources receives a new requisition to fill a position. There are some positions that are filled very frequently, for example, sanitation service worker. In that instance and others like it, essential functions are not reviewed if they have been updated within the last 9 months. Also, managers should request essential functions to be updated anytime a position has drastically changed. Additionally, Human Resources may request any division to review and update essential functions at any time to ensure accuracy.
As Penny mentioned, there are several reasons why essential functions will need to be written or reviewed. The process will begin when you receive an email like this one from HR. If essential functions need to be established or are determined to be outdated, you will find the following attachments: Essential Functions Questionnaire, a copy of the job description, as well as a copy of the essential functions that have previously been established, or a copy of essential functions for a similar position if they are available. Take a few moments to review the job description. Look to see what license and certifications are listed, such as driver's license or CPR certification. Make a note of these as they will need to be reflected in the essential functions. Let's take a look at the Essential Functions Questionnaire. This form is to be used to list the essential functions of the job, as well as the percentage of time that an employee spends performing each task. Here are a few things to keep in mind. Most positions can be described in 6 to 8 major responsibility areas. Only essential functions should be listed on this form. Do not list those that are marginal. The phrase "performs other job-related duties as assigned" will no longer be listed on essential functions. Let's go ahead and fill out this first page together. Take a look at this statement. It does identify the amount of weight that will need to be lifted, and that makes this a really good statement. Another thing that you might want to keep in mind is when filling a position that involves filing, you might want to list if they're electronic files or if they're paper files. That way, if computer skills are necessary, those can be easily identified. Once you've gone through and identified each function and assigned a percentage of time that each function would take to be performed, please make sure that you double check your percentages and ensure that they add up to 100%. A lot of times we'll get these back and they don't add up to 100 and we have to return them. So just do a quick check and make sure that those are adding up to 100%. The second page deals with the physical demands, tools and equipment used, and general employee comments. When completing this form, make sure to really think about how often the employees would need to perform these physical demands. Begin by making your selections in the drop-down box. I realize that not every computer is equipped with the same version of Word, so if you have any problems with the drop-down box, simply highlight Select, delete it, and type in your answer like this. Continue making your selections until all of them have been completed. Examples of repetitive motions are typing, filing, opening and closing hydrants, loosening or tightening screws or bolts, hammering, and operating equipment with the joystick mechanism. Please be sure to indicate what type of repetitive motions will be performed, and you can indicate that down under the general employee comments. So just a quick note, not all of the positions will have environmental conditions. For example, in most instances, there would be no reason for an administrative assistant to experience environmental conditions as they generally work within an office setting. When selecting what type of physical strength is required, you may be a little confused as to what each statement means. So let's review that. Little physical effort, exerting up to 10 pounds of force occasionally. Light work, exerting up to 20 pounds of force occasionally and or up to 10 pounds of force frequently. Medium work, exerting 20 to 50 pounds of force occasionally and or 10 to 25 pounds of force frequently. Heavy work, exerting 50 to 100 pounds of force occasionally and or 25 to 50 pounds of force frequently. Very heavy work, exerting an excess of 100 pounds of force occasionally and or an excess of 50 pounds of force frequently. Keep in mind, you must be able to justify your response based upon the functions that the employee must be able to perform. Please be sure to complete the vision statement before moving on to tools and equipment used. For this position, they need close, distance, and peripheral vision. The general employee comments area also acts as an area which will allow you to list any other important information not previously covered. Examples would be needs to be able to work overtime, needs to know specific software such as Access, and needs strong communication skills. Finally, do remember to sign and date the form. Keep in mind that this form needs to be completed by a supervisor and cannot be completed by somebody holding that current position. Scan and send a copy to Jackie Nemeth at jnemet@akronohio.gov. If you do not have access to a scanner, you may send it through interoffice mail to the Department of Human Resources. Once we receive the Essential Functions questionnaire, the information is then copied over to the Identifying Essential Functions worksheet. This document will then be emailed back to you along with instructions on how to complete the form. You will also find a draft of the essential functions. Please note that this is the last step in completing the essential functions for this position. When you receive this form, go ahead and print it out, as you're going to be circling yes or no for each category. And you're also going to need to sign where it says approved by, and you're going to need to date. So right on up here. Let's take a look at some of these questions. They might be a little bit confusing. So the first question says, does the job exist to do this function? So for this question, I want you to think back to why this position was created, or why is it currently being filled? Did your office need an administrative assistant to answer the telephones? Or maybe the sanitation department needed a sanitation service worker to pick up bulk trash. So this is going to go to question A, or item A, and it's going to go to this question here. So ask yourself, does the position of sanitation service worker exist to collect and load household trash into the rear of packer truck? If the answer is yes, circle yes. If the answer is no, circle no. You're going to continue on throughout the form answering this first question here. So again, does sanitation service worker exist to collect tires? If the answer is yes, circle yes. If no, circle no. I understand that number 2 can be a little bit confusing, so let's go ahead and break that down. The question asks, are there other employees generally available to do this function if the incumbent cannot do it because of a disability condition? Keep in mind that there is often someone to cover a position should somebody be off on vacation or due to an illness. That's not what this question is really asking. This question is asking, is there somebody who is available on a permanent basis to take over that function if an employee can no longer perform it? So again, looking at sanitation service worker, is there somebody who can on a permanent basis collect and load household trash into the rear of the packer truck if an employee can no longer perform that function? If the answer is yes, circle yes. If the answer is no, circle no. Continue throughout the form, making the selection for each category. Question 3 asks, would taking this function from the job fundamentally change the job? So for example, would you find yourself needing another administrative assistant if your current administrative assistant could not answer the telephone? Question 4, would there be any significant consequences if the function is not done? So for this question, let's look at these examples. What would happen if a safety communications technician could not clearly communicate? What would happen if trash is not removed from a citizen's curb? These are the kinds of questions that you want to ask yourself to really think about if there are any consequences of the job not being done. Question 5 asks if a license or certificate is required for the specific function. So again, if the function is drives to meetings, you're going to need to verify on the job description that a driver's license is actually required. Otherwise, you cannot require it in the essential functions. However, if an employee needs to travel to meetings but is not required to hold a driver's license, that would be acceptable. It just cannot say drives to meetings. Questions 6 and 7 deal with if somebody who previously held that position or someone who currently holds that position actually performs that function or performed it. Go ahead and select yes or no for each of those questions. Then make sure that when you come down to what percentage of time per week is spent doing this function, don't forget to fill that in. That might be a little easy to forget as there's nothing in that box. Finally, question 9. In your opinion, is this function essential to the job? Remember, it's simply asking for your opinion. So go ahead and select yes or no based on your honest opinion. One final reminder to go ahead and sign and date that form before you return it. This form can be returned electronically, or you can send it inter-office mail to the Department of Human Resources. One final step is just to go back to the email that was sent to you, open the essential functions, and verify that these are accurate. These will be the essential functions if you say that they're accurate. Otherwise, just let us know what changes need to be made. You'll notice here that we have certain things highlighted. These may be things that we've added. If you see anything highlighted, pay particular attention to that, as it's highlighted to call your attention to it. Once you have told us whether or not these draft essential functions are accurate, and you have completed the identifying worksheet, your essential functions are complete.